It's been 5 years since I started to teach a class that is in this synagogue called Exploring Judaism. This is an introduction course to Judaism. And one of the classes that I thought was important to include was Jewish symbols. Because if you ask a person, what is the most Jewish symbol that they can think of? Let's just make an experiment. What is the Jewish symbol? Menorah, Magen David. Any other options? So, what's interesting, you are clearly a very educated audience, but I would say every other year I get this answer, that this is the most Jewish symbol. Because if you are a tourist in Israel, for example, you would see this a lot, this symbol. And you might think that this is the most Jewish symbol. So this is called Hamsa. This is I would say, the Jewish version of this, because it has the letter Chai in it, which means life, and the little Star of David on top. But it can be different. They can be very different. So a palm-shaped symbol famous throughout North Africa and the Middle East, and commonly used in jewelry and wool art, called Hamsa. It's an Arabic word that means 5. Probably referring to the 5 fingers of the hand, of the palm. It's similar to the Hebrew word chamisha, Hamsa, chamisha. It means the same in Hebrew, in Arabic. And this is an ancient symbol that appears in archaeological findings dated as early as the 8th century BCE, and some say that even earlier. By the way, much earlier than Magen David, the Star of David, became Jewish. There are many theories about its origin, many referring to ancient gods and their protection, so the palm that would stop your enemies. So it's like a little stop sign for everybody that doesn't wish you well. Hamsa is not referenced in Torah, and as far as I know, there is no reference in Talmud or any other Jewish literature. But so is Magen David. So is the same as with Magen David. However, one can argue that the notion of a protective hand has existed for a long time in Judaism. It dates back to the biblical times, where it's referenced as the strong hand of God who led you out of Egypt from the house of bondage with a strong hand. And probably the same imagery is reflected in Hamsa. The interpretation that I like comes from Dr. Adizes. He's a management expert, and he wrote a book called The Ideal Executive. In it, there is a chapter called Leadership is Being a Thumb. And he drew an example and a lesson from the symbol of Hamsa. So he said, some of you may know it, I think I mentioned it once before, that he said that all fingers are different on our hand, but only together they form a hand. When we see when we see a symbol where 5 fingers are different but together, it's a symbol of a blessing. But when we see that 5 fingers are different but separate, this is the symbol of a curse. So, and I found it very symbolic, very interesting. He asks then, what's the role of a good leader? What's the role of a leadership? And he said the true leader is like a thumb, because it's the only finger which works with all other fingers. The only finger that connects all fingers together and makes hand. And being able to connect with people and hear others is the value Hamsa represents. And indeed, this is undoubtedly one of Jewish symbols or Torah values. The unity of people, a common set of rules and goals, is at the core of Torah's narrative. Jewish slaves liberated from Egyptian bondage who received Torah the set of rules on Mount Sinai and on their way, and are constantly on their way to the promised land, but never arrive. It's a beautiful narrative that we have. This is the formative story of our people, the formative narrative of who we are. Every Shabbat, every service, we sing Mi Chamocha, the song of freedom from the book of Exodus. All major Jewish festivals have layer of understanding. They're all multi-layered. They all have some have agricultural, some have other historical sense and meaning, but most of them have the layer of meaning that's somehow connected with Exodus. In her book, The Particulars of Rapture, Reflections of Exodus, Aviva Gottlieb Zonberg suggests that the liberation story of Israelites is the master narrative of our people, the master narrative. But each master narrative, she argues, has to have or gives rise to counter-narratives that question and challenge the main story. So let's see an example. When you have the main story, it has to be challenged. That's her argument. This week we read the climax of the 10 plagues. It includes the 3 final plagues: the locusts, darkness, and the death of the Egyptians' firstborn. The point of the story, the master narrative, is that all-powerful God defeated the mortal Pharaoh and fulfilled the promise God made to our ancestors. However, Zonberg writes that this master narrative naturally provokes some questions and counter-narrative. The counter-narrative for this story is a painful question. What sin could the babies and their parents possibly have committed to deserve this punishment? Why firstborn? Why killing babies? It's painful. It's very, 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 very serious question. There seems to be a disorder, disbalance, and unresolved injustice in this question, in this struggle between the master narrative and counter-narrative. Zonberg argues that we don't need to resolve this dissonance. We can just keep asking questions. For Zonberg, an alternative for dealing with the dissonance between narrative and counter-narrative is the model of endless questioning, in which the answer doesn't totally silence the questioner. Any definitive answer, the moment you give answer and you're certain about it, will bring more questions, will bring more counter-narratives. The fact that we can ask questions is the most important part of the text and our attitude towards the text. Questions play an important role in Judaism. And this parasha, this Torah portion in particular, God commands that the story of Exodus be told in response to children's questions. And when you ask, and when your children ask, what do you mean by this tradition, this rite? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Eternal One who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. So the play word is the same in Hebrew as in English. Pass over, and therefore the name of the festival to Passover. This is the basis of the Passover Seder custom for the 4 questions. This is the only way to be honest, compassionate, and just. As readers, we must confront and challenge troubling aspects of our sacred narratives. We shouldn't just read and accept them. We must continue asking questions that preserve our awareness of difficult moments in the text. In later rabbinic interpretations, which is very interesting, Egypt, in Hebrew Mitzrayim, is a symbol representation of our narrowness, our narrow place. This is again the play word of the word Egypt. In Hebrew, Mitzrayim comes from the same root as the word narrow. So when you come out of Egypt, you come out of your narrow place. You start looking at the world with a wide open eyes, and start questioning, start challenging all the assumptions and all dogmas. Did the Israelites hear the cry of Egyptians? Did it remind them of their cry when they themselves suffered the death of their children earlier in the narrative? Midrash, rabbinic legend, has a wonderful story, fills the gap and unanswered questions in the Hebrew Bible, and has the following story, by the way, which ends with the question as well. On seeing the dying Egyptians, the angels, who often surround God in such legends, were about to break into song when God silenced them, declaring, "How dare you? The work of my hands, the Egyptians, are drowning at the sea, and you will sing a song?" The secret to unity is not for all people to think in the same way. It's to care and not to be indifferent. Challenging each other, questioning all systems and texts, and supporting each other in a time of need. This is what it means to be a good person and a good Jew.